It's myself and Shane. Alan Quinlan has joined us in studio. Morning, Quinny.
Morning, lads. How are you?
We're great, and we've a bucket full of stuff to chat about. First of all, we might talk about the Women's Six Nations, obviously starting this weekend. I met your presenting colleague outside the Aviva on Saturday after the game, and she was obviously buzzing after having got the Grand Slam done. And I was watching her press conference, Niamh Briggs, during the week, obviously in the lead into this game, spoke really positively about the spirit, about the players, about where they're at, about vibing off the fact that they were in the same environment as the Grand Slam team, and some of the players quizzing Johnny Sexton about, you know, his technique and various bits and pieces. Like, I was really buying her positivity, I must say.
Yeah, I think she's very excited about it. I think working with players now who are not all of them are fully contracted, but they're in a professional setup now, if you like. It wasn't that long ago we were, talking about the setup, the facilities, not the facilities, but just the whole environment and support networks. That was obviously pretty high profile, the training, the skills, matches we've seen the last couple of years, not qualifying for the World Cup, watching the ladies then play, and a lot of talk about skills development and where they're at, which is understandable. And I think that was something that kind of came out in a lot of those disappointments in the last couple of years. Upskilling the players, and they've now been put into an environment, albeit again you can still talk about it, and the level of the depth of those contracts and the amount of money that's been paid. But it's a very, very good starting point, and you have to give the IRFU credit for that. They took on board what was in the report, and they're starting to make changes around the women's game, which is very positive. There's still a long road. I think Greg McWilliams has openly spoken about, I worked for the Women's Six Nations last year, and I remember preparing for the Welsh game, the first game in the RDS to the tournament, and it was all about patience and it'll take time. It's still the case. There's a lot of new players are starting tomorrow against Wales. There's only one of the backs, Nicole Cronin, who played in that game against Wales last year. So there's 6 new backs in there. Now 3 or 4 of them have made their debuts in Japan on the tour in the summer. And that was a really important tour for them, as regards togetherness, getting a feel for what it's like to go on tour, the preparation, all that kind of stuff. Time for video analysis, and really kind of building as a unit and feeling, when you go away and jump on the plane, it's great. I always love those summer tours. By the way, I hope they don't get rid of them. There's talks that there will be a global calendar in the men's game now, and that maybe we won't see those tours anymore. I love them as a player, and obviously working on them now. So for the girls to go away and kind of have that bond and enjoy each other's company and play those matches.
Tracks
it does. It makes them feel part of something that's moving in the right direction. I think that's my whole point here. So there's 8 changes in this team from last year. So half the team, it's new. There's a lot of young, exciting girls who are in the team. So Wales are a little bit more progressed because it's their second year with professionals.
And they have 15 players playing in the English Premier 15s.
All 23 tomorrow.
Sorry, 23 in the
whole 23
are in
the Premiership, so that gives you an added advantage, and it's something that we've spoken about in the women's game, about getting the level of the All-Ireland League, getting more teams competitive. That is one of the challenges.
So by design, they're a little bit... They're obviously year 3 into their own professional thing, and so by design, that coupled with the Premier 15s, they're a little bit further down the track. But it's almost that race for third still, isn't it? Like, we're still expecting France and England.
Yes, France and England are the 2 powerhouses here, and again, it's a tough start for Ireland being away. And going back to your original question with Niamh, she is very excited about it because, and I'm sure the other coaches are as well, being able to see the development and the skills, the skill set, the enthusiasm, the exuberance of some of these young players that are coming in, which is brilliant for them. So it's going to be difficult because you just, as you say, 23 for Wales are more advanced, and that is probably the hard part here. It's hard to kind of it's hard to kind of go and say, well, they should be beating Wales, they should be beating Scotland, they should be beating Italy, because you're not really sure where the other teams are at yet, and you'll get an obvious barometer tomorrow.
Yeah, well, there's a big unknown.
Wales were very big and physical last year, and that's one kind of area. Now, look, if you look at the Irish forwards, there's some brilliant players in there. Dorothy Wall is there, Maeve O'Leary, Brittany Hogan, Sam Monaghan, she was outstanding last year. Nicola Friday, the captain, Niamh Jones, the hooker. Sive McGrath is she's only 18, so she's young, and it's her first cap. Linda Daojang, she's a brilliant player, great ball carrier. So the pack looks, that it has something about it. They have a fair bit of experience. They're all playing at a high level. A little bit unknown in the backs, a little bit, but it should be exciting, and it'd be stating the obvious to say, if they were to get a result tomorrow against Wales, how good that would be for confidence going forward. They've got France home next in Cork, which is, France and England are the ones to beat, obviously, and the others then. So I think it is a kind of a race to try and get into that position of beating Wales, beating Scotland. Both of those games are away. The Italian game is away, so
that's dodgy then, the way
makes
the
it harder. Yeah, so
England and
you're probably
France
thinking
at home, then
you're going to lose to England and France. With all due respect, probably, even though you have them at home, and then the three that you kind of want a little bit of edge, that are fairly evenly matched most years, those three are away. So it makes it a little bit different. But look, no matter what happens here, I think we'll see a team that's very well prepared. That'll be exciting to watch, and that look, they're going to take a little bit of time, and I'm sure Greg and Niamh and Dennis Fogarty and the other coaches will say sometimes it's a bit unknown, because it is a step up, this level. It's the same in the men's. When you go up to international level, it's a step up. So hopefully they start well and get a bit of confidence and build confidence tomorrow, and we wish them well.
Yeah, Cardiff Arms Park, 2:15 tomorrow. We'll be keeping an eye. The under-20s we wanted to chat a little bit about as well, because although it sort of wrapped up obviously last weekend, we haven't had a huge amount of time to pick through it. They really sort of look at the TV exposure obviously helps with this stuff, and the fact that they were winning helps with this stuff, but the fact that like a lot of the players look like they are absolutely ready to step onto the pitch for senior rugby, including Prendergast at half. A lot of them look like they could just step into URC team.
Yeah, and a few have maybe been added to Munster, Leinster squads for Europe, which shows the captain has been brilliant, Gus McCarthy as well. The skill set. Producing another hooker who can, like Dan Sheehan, who can run up and down the wing and offload. It's phenomenal. He was brilliant. Where are they all going to kind of stay? Because they've Kelleher and Sheehan. You think they're going to be around for a long time.
Same for some of the back rows, like the competitiveness there. That's the challenge now, isn't it, for a lot of these players that like.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that people were asking me. Joe was asking me in the Virgin Media last week. We didn't have a lot of time, Adrian, to go through it. I know Bernard Jacquin spoke about it this week, whether it was on the podcast or on Against the Head. Where do these guys go now? And last year's team, where like a lot of last year's under-20s Grand Slam winning team have gone into the provinces, and we haven't seen a huge amount of them, probably more in Leinster, but obviously there's a couple of Connacht guys in here that are incredibly exciting. Hugh Gavin and John Devine, the winger and the first centre as well. The two Munster lads again, Brian Gleeson, Rowan Quinn. They look like men, not boys, really, don't they?
It's funny that the line-up, I know they take on the senior team in Abbottstown very often in kind of behind closed doors games. Like, is that being exposed to elite performance at that age?
Well, when it's controlled, it isn't like back in the day when Shannon, when I was with Shannon, and we'd go up to Derrynockan in Young Munsters training ground, which was not in Greenfields. It was another mile or two out the road. The lighting wasn't great, and you're doing full-on scrums and mauls against Peter Claw, Gerard Claw, Desi Claw, Gerald, Ray Ryan, all these fellas, and you're gone, Jesus Christ, if I fall on the ground here tonight, I'm gone. There's no linesmen, there's no sighting commission, so that's a bit different. That was free for all, and the more kind of rows and stuff, the better training went. Both for both sides, and that was when I was starting out in the IL. This is a little bit different, Shane. It's controlled, but it is. Your point is, someone like Paddy McCarthy there, the tight head, has been outstanding as well. The ball carrying. He's Joe McCarthy's brother. George Haddon, he got a try the other night against England. Yeah. Even the props coming off the bench, George Morris and Fiachna Barrett, they've all added, here, and they all look really, really strong and powerful. The biggest strength here, I think, or the biggest thing that's the most impressive for me is the physicality of the forwards. I saw him in round 1 over in Wales. Dave and I were over doing the commentary, and we were there very early, so when they arrived, they walked out onto the field. Obviously, it was very quiet. I was chatting to Richie Murphy and a few of the coaches and some of the players. I remember Evan O'Connell as a little small whippersnapper going around Paul's house when we were back in the day.
And small whippersnapper anymore.
Danny Sheehan as well, Frankie's nephew. He's Joey's son. So these guys, I just couldn't believe how big they were. How physical.
That's not the sort of thing that'll help them when they get to the senior ranks, because
they'll be all big.
Apart from anything else, the players that they're playing against now will
all be big. Yeah. But the skill set is really impressive. Hugh Cooney, who's the outside centre, and someone told me about him before. I think it was John O'Sullivan, writes for the Times, before the tournament. Just he watched a lot of these guys, and people know their names now.
Yeah.
People have watched him in the last number of weeks. He's a brilliant player, Hugh Cooney. There's lots of these guys who will go on and make it and be very, very good professionals and could play for Ireland. They have the real potential. Conor O'Tiernig, James McNabney, you can name them all.
On that playing for Ireland bit, are we likely to see, now there might be an absolutely sensationalist aspect to this, so feel free to remove the air from that if you need to. Are we likely to see more Ben Healy's, in the sense that, like, we're talking about obviously a very young profile of this Irish team that are there at the minute, very young profile around the provinces in a lot of the positions you're talking about. The opportunities might not be there for a lot of these players, and they may seek to. Scotland will be an obvious one.
The starting team the other night is about 10 again from Leinster. So
I know Ben Healy is qualified for Scotland.
I know exactly what you mean. Could they go somewhere in residency and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, there's about 10 of these guys. The starting team last week were from Scotland. There's 2 or 3 from Connacht, 2 from Munster. I'm trying to look at the rest of the names here. 1 from Ulster in the starting team. Yeah, that's the way it was last week. So the vast majority of Leinster again, which is not a surprise. There's a couple of Connacht lads on the bench as well, from Sligo, Corinthians, Galwegians. So I have to mention them. I think the underage setup and systems in Connacht is really, really strong, and they've 4 or 5 guys here who are real good players who will make a big impact. You think those guys will kind of get into the Connacht group, I mean it respectfully, easier. The obvious one is the 10 or 12 or 15 Leinster fellas that are probably in this wider squad. Where do they go? Can Leo Cullen, can they go into the academy? Is there enough room for them? How many went in last year? So there's a certain number of them. It's just a numbers game. Where do they all go? And that's the point I was making. So then some of them will have to make decisions if they're really good. And I think like the hooker and captain, Gus McCarthy. So again, I don't want to speak for the guy, and he may fancy his chances of going into the setup, but with Sheehan and Kelleher,
young as well, like,
you're just kind of thinking, I want to play for Ireland. He wants to play for Ireland, Gus McCarthy. Does he need to go to another province? Does he need to go to the UK, France, whatever, and then he doesn't get selected for Ireland? Or does he go to another province?
Well, a career can just whittle away. We'll talk later on about Quinlan Kelleher in the football, and a career can just...
Well, there's a number of other players in Leinster who are good enough to play probably international rugby, and they're staying with Leinster. 2 obvious ones are Max Deeg and Scott Penny. So, you know what I mean? It's down to the personal choices, because if you look at Max Deegan, got capped a number of years ago, and he was ahead of Doris, he was ahead of Jack Conan, and now, he's an incredible player for Leo Cullen to have. Don't get me wrong, he's a brilliant player and could. There is a risk moving elsewhere as well. That can happen.
They will also
there's a lot of really good under-20s there, and it's very exciting, I think. And how they're managed now is really important, and what the decisions they make individually with their families, and there'll be agents sniffing around trying to sign some of them up as well.
There'll probably be they'll play a lot of URC, of course, is the thing, which we'll mention before we wrap up. Leinster Stormers tonight, Connacht Edinburgh, Munster Glasgow and Ulster Bulls, all of those 3 games tomorrow. With Munster particularly, like obviously people are looking ahead to the Heineken Champions Cup next weekend. They have the Sharks on Saturday. They got so close to a Heineken Cup semi-final last year. How important is it, Quinny, now that from
this
a Munster
game is
point
bigger.
of view that they close this out strongly?
Glasgow is bigger than next week, to be honest, because they're not going to win the European Cup. Of course, they want to go to the Sharks in South Africa and give it a go. But the reward for if they were to beat the Sharks in South Africa is Toulouse away. So you're kind of thinking they won't think like that. Of course, you try and take it 1 week as they go. But tomorrow against Glasgow, for me, getting a minimum of 4 points would put them to 40. 4 or 5 points puts them to 51, 52 points. That's enough to secure them definitely a top 8, I think. Given the other chasing pack of the Bulls, the Sharks, Connacht, Benetton, Cardiff, I'd say to be in the top 8, because they have to go to South Africa for the 2. They play Stormers and Sharks, which is going to be incredibly difficult anyway. So if they take their eye off the ball tomorrow, it's a problem. And we saw from the last game they played in Cork, they won 49-42 against the Scarlets. The attack was brilliant, but the defence was poor. So they need to sort that out, because Glasgow will have their internationals back tomorrow. Not all of them, but they'll have some of them, and it'll be dangerous. But for Connacht, it's the interesting one for me, because Connacht are, since the last round, they're into 8 on 39 points. They play Edinburgh next at home tomorrow, then Cardiff at home, and then they're away to Glasgow. Win 2 of those, and I think they're in the top 7 maybe.
They probably have to be the first two realistically, don't they? The Edinburgh and Cardiff.
They have to beat Edinburgh and Cardiff, yeah, and then they're away to Glasgow in the last one. But they've given themselves a real shot in the arm here. You wouldn't have thought it kind of 2-3 months ago, of really getting something out of the season now by making the playoffs, number 1, and also being in Europe. The problem they are, if Connacht finished 8, they may not make Europe, because we've no Welsh team in that top 8, and there has to be from the 4 Shields.
So that would
it'd knock number 8 out if there isn't. So at the moment, if you can imagine where they're sitting at the moment, if it was now and it was over, they're sitting at 8. Cardiff are in 10th. Cardiff would replace them and jump in to Europe. Connacht would still play in the playoffs. So hell of a lot to play. 3 rounds to go. Leinster obviously Stormers tonight. That should be a game, and then they're in South Africa. Ulster have 3 home games, so I think they're in a great position to have a home quarter, possibly catch the Stormers as well. They'll be hoping Leinster win tonight, and but they have 3 home games, so they have the easiest run in Ulster.
Rory Larmer was in contact on YouTube to say that he's loving your jacket.
Very good.
Nice jacket, like.
Yeah, thank you.
You bring up the fashion stakes in here,
yeah.
Jesus, yeah.
It's very tasty, isn't it?
Putting the pressure on.
Although I wouldn't be going on Shane's judgment around the fashion side.
Adrian's jealous. Middle-aged fashion set.
Good man, thanks a million.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
lads.
games over the weekend. We'll catch up with you next week.